very much a warm introduction, and it is good. I've been to some other sessions, but it's always good to come back, as you said, from having been involved from early on. It's great to see that it's grown, that people coming have changed over the years, but it's still pretty strong and vibrant. So that's really good. So the topic tonight was around forming a value management office. So what do you think value management office might be? Is it just like a fancy pants rebranding of the PMO, and we can just kind of carry on with the way we've been working before? I hope by the end of this talk this evening, you'll see that actually there's more involved in that. In fact, it's sort of readjusted the way we work with the rest of our business. It's enabled us to think more about continual flow, continual delivery of work. But fundamentally, it's actually changed how we think about our roles as project managers and scrum masters and the other people in my team. So let me, first of all, set the scene for you. Obviously, I presume most of you have heard of Vector, and if you have, you probably associate us with being the power distribution network for the Auckland region. I don't think there were that many outages with the storm we had the other night, but obviously when the storms happen, it's our branding we see on those field service provider vans that go out to help get your power back on as quickly as possible. Note the branding is changing, but that's only about 40% of our business overall. Probably nearly about the same amount is our smart metering business. So majority of smart meters in New Zealand are Vector smart meters, and we've got a growing proportion of the Australian market, which is just opening up now as well. So that's an interesting part of what we do. And smart meters are really critical to smart homes. We also have PowerSmart, which we created through amalgamating several businesses that we've bought. But it's a new division that we've got now, which is focused on new energy solutions. So solar is a big thing of that. You might have seen in some of the news about the new multi-storey car park they're going to put on the walls down at the docks, and it's going to have solar panels on the top, and then they're going to use an electronic barge for moving the cars. So we're involved in that with some other people too. So Vector Fibre is communications long-haul back channel, backhaul is the right term. And then gas, so on gas, you might have seen the bottle swap stuff that we do, but we also do big bottles for houses that can't be on mains gas. And then stuck in the middle of this, helping all of these work together, is Vector Digital, which is the part of Vector that I work with. Now, I alluded to that new energy solutions. Part of Vector's vision at the moment is about helping build towards new energy futures. And by putting ourselves there, we kind of deliberately put ourselves in a space that's experiencing a lot of disruption at the moment. A lot of you will see this disruption in your own organisations anyway. One of the significant ones for us is climate change. So we're getting more and more severe storms, and where a lot of our distribution network is still above ground, obviously trees fall against them, and that causes problems with outages. So we're trying to be smarter about how we spot where those outages are, but we've also got an ongoing program of getting rid of trees next to the cables and replanting some elsewhere. But that's a bigger problem. Population growth as well, especially in Auckland. We're struggling to keep up with we can't expand the physical network as fast as the population is growing, so we're having to do some smarter things there. Consumer expectations, whilst we're mostly a business-to-business organisation, so we don't sell you the electricity. That's one of the power retailers do that. But consumer expectations and changing consumer demands obviously drives different needs through to those retailers, which come on to us then, which is where a lot of that smart metering work is coming from. Competition is an obvious one. Obviously, technology adoption. Electric vehicles is growing in popularity. There's some parts of the Auckland region which would be significantly under strain if we had too many of these all plugged in and charged at once. But again, we're working smartly to be able to cope with that without necessarily having to double or triple the size of the network. And then, of course, lastly, legislative change and regulation. So there's lots of things that are happening around us. Now, as an organisation, our background, especially within the networks business, is largely infrastructure based. Because of that, a lot of the ways we had of working are quite planned in. What today we would recognise as waterfall. But in that world of disruption, obviously, as you all know, Agile Auckland, that style of working doesn't suit the ability that we need to be able to respond more adaptively. The overhead of stopping and starting projects, of forming and then expanding teams, not knowing what any system is going to look like. I know being overly focused on the cost of building something and not necessarily thinking about what is the total cost of ownership. So in order to respond better to the challenges that we're faced, we need to switch more to a continual flow way of working, where we're kind of building and maintaining stable teams that stay together for a long period of time. And we can deliver, obviously, the systems, we can support them on an ongoing basis. But importantly, as I'll talk about later, in these value streams, as we call them, we're bringing together not just development and IT operations people, but also business operations people in these teams. So it's a biz DevOps rather than just a DevOps model. And because of that, we can have a really, really good sense of what is the total cost of ownership of those systems. Now, why value stream? If you work in a product organisation, you might recognise this way of working as the teams that you bring together that own that product and manage and develop that product over time. We're not necessarily a product organisation because we're mostly business to business and very technology driven. So we decided instead to think about organising ourselves around key business functions. So those either the business functions which are facing directly out to market, or the business functions which are supporting that. So when we think about that, we're focused on, from those of you that do business architecture or enterprise architecture will understand this, but understanding the business capabilities that are required for that business function. Then, the value stream model is looking at what are the services we need in order to support those capabilities. So you can see what we're starting to build out here. So the value stream is something that's there to support the business capabilities. At the moment though, what we're seeing here is solely the people who are in the business function. So we can see here a couple of roles, SMEs, so subject matter experts from that business function, but also value stream lead. So because we call this a value stream, we wanted to have something which was descriptive of a responsible role in there. If you're used to working with Scrum or other frameworks like that, you'll be used to a role like product owner. So the value stream lead is like a product owner, but with a few more responsibilities on top. If you think about that, keep that in your mind. Now, if we bring our Vector Digital in here as well, we've still got our business SMEs and our value stream lead, but we've now also got another role, the value stream facilitator. So much like in a Scrum team, we've got a Scrum Master, the role of the value stream facilitator is there to actually facilitate and enable the value stream to operate, particularly make sure that it's fed and watered, and things get delivered out of it as it should. And we've got our technical SMEs as well. In terms of who's fulfilling that role of value stream facilitator, in most cases it's a project manager. In some of our value streams, we've got Scrum Masters where the value stream only has a single team, and they've been willing and able to step up and take on a bit more responsibility, and they're the value stream facilitator. But in some of our bigger value streams, you'll see here, we've got a value stream facilitator, and then because we've got multiple teams in that value stream, we've also got some coach roles that are supporting those teams as well. So that's just trying to give you a flavour of why the value stream is there, what's in the value stream, and how we're working with digital and the business functions to support those business capabilities that enable us to do our work. Well, I didn't know whether you were familiar with the biz DevOps. Probably had people speak DevOps at you quite a lot. So I just wanted to touch on that briefly. Hopefully the name biz DevOps really highlights what it is, but it's actually enables us to think about we're building a collaborative space where business operational, IT operational and development staff can work and live together all the time, so in these long-standing teams. And we can see, obviously, some of the roles like value stream lead and the subject matter experts are more focused just on the business side. But as you kind of look around that Venn diagram, you can see that there are other roles that pop in which are kind of focused on the overlap of those concerns. And then right in the middle is the prioritized backlog. That's the thing around which everybody moves. It's not been without its challenges bringing those people together, and that's still evolving. But we've taken that stance that we wanted it to be fully inclusive, meant that we could enter some of those conversations with business functions in the language of being a joint venture. Indeed, the funding for the work that's done in the value stream from a capital expenditure perspective is the business functions money, but for the operations support and maintenance enhancement work, that's the money that Vector Digital has. So in a very real way, we're both putting money into this value stream as well. So in that sense, it is much more like a joint venture than you would expect. So looking now at, we can see here 3 value streams, different number of teams in them, 1, 2, and 3 teams alike. Where we've got a lot of value streams together for the same business unit, we're still using the word program to describe a collection of value streams. So this is a program of value streams. You can see here at the tail end of the value stream, we've got this little group called the advisory group. So rather than calling it the value stream management group, it's the value stream advisory group. So this is the value stream facilitator, so PM with a different hat on, the value stream lead, representing the business needs, probably an architect, a BA, maybe a tech lead, that sort of thing. So the people that can help do some of that discovery work, help refine the higher level backlog ahead of the teams getting involved in working in things at a lower level. And then we can see the teams there with their different backlogs. Importantly, each value stream has its own purpose, its own outcomes that it's working to. But this, again, this was being very focused on the outcomes that we were after. But that was only one of the planks that we wanted to put in place. As well as focusing on outcomes, we also wanted to make sure that we focused on people. So putting people into a situation like this potentially could be hard work, different ways of working. So we wanted to call out how people are in the same discipline together. So we formed our practices, as we're calling them. So you can see here those same collections of BAs, test dev, etc. in the separate teams within the value streams are now being shown in their respective practices. And that means that they can come together and do things as a practice. They can get their pastoral care and so on, separate from thinking about the work that they do. And the relationship between the value stream facilitator and the practice lead is a critical one. As we found when we were exploring with our PMs, the changing role for the PM. Traditionally, PMs have been used to making hiring decisions, recruiting people into their projects. That's not the case anymore. The practice leads are responsible for that. So there's a negotiation over new capability or new capacity. Sometimes the practice lead will be able to say, well, we'll reskill this person rather than going out to market to get somebody else. So we're still learning and exploring with that, but that's been a healthy change to separate those concerns. But focusing now a little bit more on the practice. As I said, if you think about the value streams as where we're going to work, the practices are our home. So it's where we gather together with people that have got the same discipline, the same interests, and we focus on our personal, professional development. We talk about wanting holidays, so we don't have meetings on desert islands. But importantly also, we have, as well as the value stream teams and the value stream overall having a backlog of work, the practice has a backlog of practice improvements as well. So that's how we get together as a practice to hone our craft and be the best that we can be and learn from each other. So that's really important too. So of course, all of this, I've just talked about practices. The topic of this talk is the Value Management Office. So talking about realigning, talking about the changes that we've done, we've had to change, we've had to realign ourselves. Especially for those in my team that are more used to running traditional projects, moving again in this sort of continual flow-based model has been a big change for some of them especially. So I want to talk to you about what that change has been like and why we ended up calling something a value management office. In working with my team to how to make this switch, kind of very focused on how traditionally project managers are used to being in sort of quite a hierarchical relationship with the teams that they work with, and having to have all communication go through them. And sometimes that's for very good reasons, but PMs are very good gap fillers. If they see some communication not happening or a task not happening, it's very common for a PM to step in and make sure, pull those pieces together and make sure that it still happens. BAs are very good at that as well. And that's a critical enabling function of project managers, definitely. But in the new way of working, and we have found in some instances where the PMs are not let go of this way of relating with people, their workload will just increase and increase and increase as more things are coming through. So we're having to disentangle that. And instead, we're trying to help them revision themselves as these value stream facilitators. We're creating this network of people around them where the actual people relating directly with the teams in the value stream are roles like the value stream lead. Instead, that's more like a product owner, but with extra responsibilities. And if you have a value stream with more than one team, as I said, you might have a separate coach. Some of our value streams are small enough to warrant the value stream facilitator, as long as they've got the skills, to also be the coach. We've got a couple of value streams where the value stream facilitators are really experienced PM, but they're not up for, and you wouldn't want the team to experience being coached by them, because it just wouldn't work. So we have some coaches that are spread across more than one value stream that are supporting those sorts of teams as well. So we're working with the PMs on this change, and it is a big change for some of them especially. And so now to why we called, why did we call it a value management office? Well, with this new way of working, we could have just called it an Agile PMO. It probably looks to you more like we're running projects more along Agile lines now. There's two reasons why we couldn't do that. One, as still a heavily infrastructure-based organisation, there still will be times when we're needing to run some of our work as more of a traditional waterfall project, and that's totally the right thing to do. Think about Dave Snowden's Kinetic model. If it's on that simple or just complicated side, then being plan-driven is the right approach. But most of the things we're tackling now is in that complex space, which is why we need this exploratory or more agile ways of working. But we couldn't call our group Agile because we don't just do Agile. And in that future, where we're doing more flow-based work, we'll be looking at starting and stopping fewer projects, and eventually the end state will be, fingers crossed, that we will get continual funding for those value streams, maybe agreed and reviewed or whatever once a year. And then the skill comes in realizing how can we capitalize the work that comes out, how do we get the best value out, rather than stressing about how we fund them. We're not there yet, but that future looks like a no projects future, potentially. So we couldn't really call it still a project management office either. My title going into this role was Senior Manager for Digital Delivery and Transformation. And because this is now more about continual flow, continual delivery of work, we could have just called it digital delivery. And that would have done the job in part. But what we found was that something that was missing, something that we needed to do, we needed to take a stronger stance on benefits management. Because while you're continually evolving and elaborating your roadmaps and your backlogs, you can get very focused on quite small pieces of work, and small incremental pieces of work. And sometimes lose sight of what are the key things we're looking to enable in the organisation, where's the benefits or the value that we're looking to achieve. So we wanted to take a stronger stance on benefits management. So ultimately, we ended up calling this the Value Management Office because that called out that we were delivering value. It's calling out that we're adopting a benefits management stance, as well as obviously being involved in still delivering that work. So just kind of important to understand some of the contributory factors to that, because in terms of how we thought about the practices within the value management office, looking at benefits management done well means you define your benefits, then obviously you do some work to deliver change that enables the benefits, and then at some future point you actually realise the benefits, maybe 3 months after you've put something right, or 6 months, or whatever. Sometimes, but rarely, it's immediate. So those 3 steps are often done in good benefits management, but really robust benefits management also has the sustain part to it as well. So making sure that we're monitoring and we're observing what's happening, and if the benefit starts to degrade for any reason, there's the opportunity to bring something into the backlog to give it a tick up again, maybe. But also importantly for us, this sustain, we wanted to look at it as, how do we sustain our way of working? How do we sustain making sure that we continue to get better and we don't flog ourselves in the process. So we took these 4 parts of formal benefits management and said, that defined the benefits and realising the benefits. Let's make that what value management is all about. And there's articles written about value management as a specific discipline. This enable part, well, that's where we're delivering the value. So we enable it by delivering these increments. And then lastly, this sustain is where our coaches are working. So we've named 3 practices within the value management office: value management itself, value delivery, and value stream coaching. So I'll just share with you briefly a couple of things about each of those, just so you get a sense in your mind about what they're covering. So from a value management perspective, early on, we're working with the business functions, either facilitating events for them if they haven't already established what their goals are on a yearly or quarterly basis, their must-win battles, helping them identify what are the 1 to 3 key outcomes or objectives that are going to help them achieve that must-win battle, and then what are the key results. So you can see there I've deliberately used the OKR reference there. What are the key results? What are the benefits we're looking to accrue along the way? And making them smart, so specific and measurable, etc. And then importantly, if we're able to work with the business at a strategic level, then starting to look at what are the business changes and technical enablers that will actually achieve those key results. That's where, working at this stage, we can then start to drop things out of that into a roadmap. Because remember, our value streams are business development and operations. So whether it's the business change or the technical enabler that's going to be worked on in the roadmap, that's all happening within the value stream. This value management space also is where we monitor the delivery of value. So using something like a release burn-up, you might be familiar with, just looking at things and keeping on track in very general terms. But it's also, as well as identifying value at a high level like this. So we've identified work that's desirable, but this is also the practice within which we're going to support governance. So not just that it's desirable, but also it's feasible and viable. So what is the total cost of ownership? And do we know how to do this work, or do we know some people that do? So good technical architectural reviews still, and financial due diligence as well. So all of those things are still important at whatever level of granularity we're doing it. And then obviously, at a certain point, when we're defining those benefits, because remember they're smart, so we're saying, what's the time base for this benefit? Because we know when we're expecting that benefit to be realised, we can then schedule ahead. Now we know when to do that benefits realisation review for that set of benefits, because we've called that out when we actually define the benefit. Importantly, part of that work to do the technical enablers, typically we should include, in part of our definition of done, doesn't yet, but it should include how are we building in the measurement capability to track and know that we're achieving. When we do the benefits realisation review, we need to know that we've actually achieved it. It's not just subjective or gut feel. So that's unpacked a little bit about the value management side of things. There's quite a lot happening there. In value delivery, this is more typically what you would probably be familiar with. We've got our roadmap of major initiatives and maybe epics. Then we're working with quarterly big room planning. So once a quarter, we gather all the teams together that are working in the same program. And sometimes that means bringing people from multiple cities. So we've got 3 main centres, Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. So for one of our businesses particularly, our teams are spread across all those 3 cities. So we bring them all together in Wellington. There's a cost to that, but every time we've done it, they've always, senior management, senior leadership have always seen the impact it's had, and they're always happy to support it. We had to make the case quite strongly the first couple of times. There's now an acceptance that that's the way it should be done, and this is a good reason not to. So that was a win. So yeah, understanding what are we planning to do for the quarter, and then sprint by sprint, obviously putting work in. So that sprint map that I'm showing there it's a best guess at the beginning of a quarter. You can't guarantee 7 sprints in that you're actually going to be doing that thing. It doesn't get locked in until sprint planning. So we're still allowing a little bit of variability, but obviously identifying ahead what we're planning to do and planning to the value we're hoping to get out of a quarter's worth of work is part of the business casing for that quarter. And then clearly monitoring the work as we go through, looking for those opportunities to improve as we go through, and obviously being ready to ship at the end as well. So as I said, that's pretty much what you would expect to see in the value delivery side of things. So this is where our PMs acting as value stream facilitators and our Scrum Masters acting as value stream facilitators. They'll be doing a lot of work obviously in this practice, but all 3 practices are important to all our roles. So I'll touch on the last of the third of the 3 practices, which is value stream coaching. So beginning of the year when I joined the company, they were planning to stand up 15 value streams and expected that we would have that done well before Christmas, probably by about now. But as we'll see in a moment, it didn't roll out quite that way, and pausing was the right thing to do. It enabled us to actually be really, really strong on what is it that we need to be ready to stand up a value stream. So we were able to look at, is that business function engaged? Are they ready? Are they pulling us in to do that work? Or are we trying to push it on them? That was one of the first early senses. And then identifying all the things that value stream will be responsible for, because if we understand the services and the purpose of the value stream, that can help us understand the capabilities needed. That's when we can then start negotiating on putting some teams together, because we know what skill sets are needed in those teams. And so forth as we go through. And that last column there is about readiness. Are we ready to launch and have our first big room planning? Are the team onboarded? Do we have epics ready for the next quarter? Is the funding and technology stance approved? And have we properly planned to launch a big room planning? And then we can go ahead and do that. So there's a bunch of stuff we're doing as we're about 5 value streams in, so we're about a third of the way so far. So this is an ongoing thing. We're hoping in this quarter to launch maybe 1 or 2 value streams. But obviously once we've actually launched it, we won't walk away. For teams that have never worked this way before, there's a lot of getting used to it that they have to go through. So what this is trying to show is that at the beginning, the coach has to be present very, very strongly to help the team grow in their comfortableness with this way of working, and to encourage them to develop. So we see over time that the team becomes more self-organizing, more self-developing, more self-learning, and they need the external support of the coach less. They'll still have a Scrum Master working with them. This is more of a value stream coach that's supporting multiple teams. But we're seeing then, towards that end point that the coach isn't needed, and they'll maybe just be called in if there's a specific need. And they can go off and focus on other value streams as well. The one thing that's not being shown here is in this sort of multi-tiered environment, within our teams we have retrospectives and our daily stand-ups. We might identify impediments that we need to work on. maybe the team can sort them themselves. If not, they can bump that up to the value stream level, and maybe other people in the value stream can help resolve it. If not, for those value streams that sit in a program of value streams, there's a team of people working to help there as well. Maybe we can bump it up there and sort of support it. But if you can't, then you know you're dealing with a real organisation. So from a value stream coaching perspective, their backlog is going to be largely consisting of organisation impediments, and this is where the value stream coach is going to be acting as that change agent, helping to corral and organise people around something to help senior leadership see the challenge, see the problem, see the opportunity of resolving it, and helping co-create. So this is the space where that type of change approach really works. So that's the three practices: value management, value delivery, and value stream coaching. That is part of our value management office. I'm going to share with you a couple of learnings that we've had so far. And as I said, we're still going through this. There's still some way to go. So there's two key learnings. The first is the approach that we used. I've been involved in quite a few agile transformations, digital transformations over the years. My take on business change was you've basically got two choices. You're either working on something that's small and incremental, and you kind of repeat through the loop. You work through a backlog of organisation change. This is my preferred style of change. This is the lean change framework, if you're not familiar with it. A hand-drawn version of it. It's designed for a small incremental change. So that previous slide where we saw that the coaching team would have a backlog of organisation impediments, this type of approach really suits to that. Making a big change like we're trying to do at the moment, if we did it like this, where we'd be working with small pockets of people, helping them co-create the change that they're going to experience so they buy into it, it would take an incredibly long time, which is maybe not a problem. There is a risk that you end up with little pockets of different practice, which in itself isn't a problem, but you end up with, in the theory of constraints, it's called local optima. People solving problems in a way that suits them, but actually it's not good for the system as a whole. So it wasn't quite right for us. And then the other is what I would call the sort of big bang approach, or shock and awe. We've kind of seen some examples of that over the last couple of years in New Zealand. In fact, when we started to embark on this, we had some of our people get a little bit worried, and we had some fearful comments coming through. You're not about to do a to us, are you? We made it very, very clear, no, we're not. Issuing new work contracts and giving people 48 hours to confirm they want to stay working for you is not the way we're wired. Pun fully intended. We weren't at a crisis point. That sort of thing can work absolutely, but we weren't at a crisis point, so that approach wasn't right for us.
So you say that approach can work. Later I'll get to explain where that actually doesn't work.
But we actually found there's a sort of a middle path between. So rather than trying to do the same change to everybody all at once and chaos that would create, as I kind of alluded to already, business function by business function, we're kind of working with them until they're ready for it and they're calling us in because they're seeing how it's working elsewhere. They've got the appetite and the energy for it. They're ready to sign up. And some parts of the organisation have already started to realign their way of thinking that's more in tune with value streams anyway. So letting them see this model working, and so it's taking longer, but I think it's been more effective. So that was my first insight. I went in hoping to. This is one of my opportunities because I do lean change training as well. But one of my opportunities to use the lean change framework, but this was just too big a problem. So it was interesting to find a kind of a new space for me anyway. The second was working with my project managers especially, but not just any Scrum Masters as well, in helping them understand how their world was changing. So because we were able to pause the rollout of value streams early on, I was able to run some workshops with my PMs across all three sites and Scrum Masters. And I modeled it initially on what are the 10 knowledge areas from the Project Management Institute's Being Body of Knowledge. Because I thought that would be something that they could latch onto, they'd be familiar with. And with each of them, progressively, we stepped through and said, right, how do you think that accountability and responsibility for that area will change in this new model? And some of them, they saw it readily, and some they didn't. Some they struggled to let go of a little bit and still are. This, by the way, is not a racing model, just to say that. It's got an R and an A, which means accountable and responsible in the way a RACI does. But if it was a true racing model, obviously you'd only have one A on a row. So, for example, on that scope row, the business owner is accountable for making sure there's clear vision and a high-level roadmap. The value stream lead is accountable for ensuring that roadmap gets turned into epics and they start having conversations with people about it. So there are different accountabilities within an area. Otherwise, we'd probably have about 57 or 157 rows. The ones I've highlighted in yellow on the side are the ones that more or less directly correspond with the PMI's body of knowledge areas. What was interesting, because we had some of our PMs were fearful that, do they have a role, especially because we were using a new role name, Value Stream Facilitator. Do we have a role anymore? Absolutely, they do. Some of the traditional command and control behaviours were not what we wanted to see. We wanted a more facilitative stance, and this was an opportunity to help them grow their skill sets. So we've added in some of the areas of competence which are more from the Scrum Master or coaching area, if you like, around continual improvement and some of those things. They're going to find more and more that organisations, when they're looking for PMs, are looking for project managers that turn up with a facilitation stance, not a traditional command and control stance. This is also helping gear them up for other things in the future as well. I'll be honest, it's not been for everybody. We've had a couple of PMs that just it wasn't for them, and they voted with their feet, and we wish them well. No hard feelings, but we've been able, through being able to have conversations around this, to help people understand how we're developing and growing them, but also to attract and retain some great talent as well. So that's been really good. So you can see in here, as well as that value stream facilitator, we're showing here what the team are directly accountable for. So that shook their world a bit. But also where the accountability is with the business or with the practice leads as well. So it's kind of creating a nice spread and understanding of those different things. So those really were my two key learnings. The change approach and helping the project managers think through the impact on their role and what it means for them. In terms of where we are and what's left, I currently have 24 direct reports. That sadly means that I can't be a good people leader to everybody in my team, because you just can't. So what we're working with at the moment, and my manager has just left, which is nice for me because I've been invited to step up and join the digital leadership team, take on a new role with more responsibility. But that means it'll be even harder for me to sort of be directly present. So I'm negotiating at the moment around setting up formally these practices. There'll be opportunities for people in my team to step up and be a practice lead, like a tech lead, and a team lead. So we have a team lead in Auckland, a team lead in covering the teams in Wellington and Christchurch, because it's about the same number. And we're not seeing that people are static in a practice. What we're encouraging people to do is, even if they start off in value management, value delivery, or value stream coaching, maybe every 3 months or 6 months, we'll get them to rotate into another practice and spend some time there and rotate into another practice. So our project manager, for example, who's now a value stream facilitator, may start off in value delivery. They may then go and spend some time in value management and learn an awful lot about benefits management and so on. And then they'll go in and spend some time coaching, or they'll learn an awful lot about facilitating teams and coaching teams. And facilitating is particularly important because what that model before was showing is that they talked about that advisory group, the value stream facilitator to a group of people around them, so that they no longer have to be in the middle of communication, but also they don't have to personally manage all the dependencies that's shared between the two. That's letting go of some of those things as well. It's been hard, but it's one of the most interesting project managers I've worked with. Is somebody I would describe as being creative and amazing. He ensured everything got delivered, and he was across the globe for 15 product teams. But he ensured that things got delivered on time, that it was really good quality. But he facilitated the team to do that. He was so good that I actually used him. He kind of joined, I called him an adjunct coach. He joined my coaching team to help with the PMs at that organisation. That's not here. That's my last organisation. Just before sort of kind of try to summarise, I want to give a quick shout out. So we didn't do all this by ourselves. We had some help along the way. So with our strategy and with our senior leadership team, we had some great support from Agile. And then with our value streams and our teams and some of the individuals, we also had some great support from Maturity as well. The reason I'm wanting to call this out is because I think this is a fantastic example of something called co-opetition. So we've got competitors here that are cooperating together for the benefit of their client. We wouldn't have been able to achieve what we've achieved with either one of them individually. They didn't necessarily have a lot of differences, but they overcame that and they were really happy to work together. They came to the party. Initially they turned up to pitch against each other, but very quickly switched. And we ended up with something that was really, really good. So I'd like to see more and more of that in the marketplace, because it's so healthy, and it's the sort of behaviours and experience that we want in our teams and in our organisations as well. It's good when we see it. So yeah, let me summarise. So if you are already working maybe with or for or in product teams, you'll be used to this continual flow sort of working. You'll be used to continual funding even maybe. You probably have stable teams that are long-standing and stay together, which is excellent. Maybe you've got a matrix model. Maybe you're calling that tribes and squads. Maybe you're calling it practices and guilds. We call it value streams and practices. You might have DevOps or even biz DevOps, which is relatively rare. You might even be applying some form of benefits management, and obviously, as I've been, coaching your team through the impact on their role. All of those things are really critical planks in what we've done. There's some other ingredients as well. It just wasn't time to go into everything. I feel like I've given you a lot anyway. But on top of all of this, it's really important to note that we really wanted to signify that this was something different. And the name that you give something is really, really important. So we called it a value management office because we were no longer about delivering projects, it's about delivering a continual flow of value. And that really helps to start changing the conversations that we're having within Factor. That's it. Thank you.